10 nuclear reactors at 2 power plants are crippled, threatening the unimaginable.
もし東京までが避難しなければならなくなった時には、この日本という国は長期間にわたった機能が失われて、
どんどん暗くなっていって、非常に怖いというかですね、恐ろしい状況。暴れる原子炉と戦ってるし、目に見えないですから、確かに目に見えない時なんですけど。
What will it take to save the country from radiation?
Mankind has never faced the forces of physics and the forces of nature that those people faced.
This is the road to nowhere. A once thriving place in one of the most prosperous countries on Earth. Japan. Radioactive Japan. Time stood still here on March 11th, 2011. Houses that aren't homes. Schools that are silent. Stores shuttered. Towns without people. Past the checkpoints, the scans, and the meticulous suit-up, layer upon layer upon layer of protection, is the place we simply know as Fukushima. Site of 3 nuclear reactor meltdowns.
ここはまず中央操作室といって発電所のいろんな機器をここから集中的に動かす。
He is a nuclear plant operator. He has always worked. He used to live nearby, but now he too cannot go home. He and his co-workers are ashamed, scorned by the neighbors they once had.
いろんなことがここの中央操作室の運転員たちは対応してきました。
He was here when it happened. Now he is hoping to make amends by helping clean up the toxic mess.
その4年前はここのエリアが全て真っ暗い状態で、小さな蛍光灯と懐中電灯で諦めたような状況で活動しましたから、今こういうふうに照明がこうとついて、こういうような形でお話しできるっていうことは、私にとっては覚醒の感があります。
This is the story of the Fukushima meltdowns. The infamous events at Fukushima Daiichi, or number 1, told by those who were there and risked everything. And the lesser-known story of its sister plant 7 miles away, Fukushima Daini, or number 2. It faced the same onslaught and challenges. But thanks to a little luck and a Herculean effort, it was saved from ending up like this. March 11th, a bad day for Japan and the world, could have been so much worse. The inevitable came without warning at 2:46 p.m. 2 giant pieces of the Earth's crust, tectonic plates, move suddenly and violently. One pushes down, causing the plate above it to spring upward like a catapult, along a 300-mile fault line. In a nation all too familiar with earthquakes, it is the largest ever recorded. Magnitude 9. Propagating outward at 9,000 miles an hour, record-breaking seismic waves careen toward land and the 10 nuclear reactors at the 2 Fukushima plants. All of them designed by General Electric, owned and operated by the largest utility in Japan, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO. They are there to feed the insatiable energy needs of Tokyo.
突然地鳴りというかものすごい大地のうなり声が聞こえて、それと同時に床が振動し始めたと。ものすごく大きいと。ただ大きな特徴はものすごく長い地震、おそらく3分ぐらいは続いてた地震だろうと。
An American nuclear reactor service technician, Carl Pilateri, is there doing some upgrades.
It was just one big hammer. The entire building was moving. Everything was coming down. The lights were crashing everywhere. And it just got worse from there, actually. In 1 nanosecond, just the entire floor went black.
私も経験のないような揺れでしたので、運転員はバーに捕まったりしゃがんでたり、そのような形で地震を耐えました。
一体いつまで続くんだと。
It lasts 6 minutes. Takeyuki Inagaki is general manager of the maintenance department for units 1 through 4 at Daiichi. He reports directly to the superintendent, Masao Yoshida. Both men have spent their entire careers at TEPCO. Inagaki worries about his wife and 2 sons.
地震が起こっておそらく家内にメールを1通打って、こういう状態だから当分帰れないと思うというメールを打って、その後は外部との連絡。
Seismometers at nuclear plants are designed to trigger an automatic emergency response after an earthquake. Power plant operators routinely drill for this, but it is still a risky, tense event. Called a scram, it is designed to put the brakes on the nuclear chain reaction of sustained fission. A nuclear reactor is fueled by uranium, an element that naturally splits apart, releasing neutrons. But uranium fission can induce more fission. When a loose neutron fires into a nearby uranium nucleus, it becomes unstable and quickly splits. Each time an atom splits, it generates heat. To make fission robust enough to generate power, uranium is enriched, shaped into pellets, and then stacked in long tubes called fuel rods. This ensures lots of uranium atoms are close enough to each other to allow a healthy chain reaction. To manage the rate of the reaction, control rods that absorb neutrons are moved in and out of spaces among the fuel. During a scram, the control rods are pushed all the way in, terminating the chain reaction. By 3:02, operators at Daiichi confirm the 3 reactors that were online have successfully scrammed. And at Fukushima Daini, all 4 reactors running full throttle also automatically shut down safely. Even though the nuclear chain reaction has now abruptly stopped, the uranium fuel rods remain very hot. It's called decay heat.
The nuclear chain reaction was stopped within seconds, but the decay heat continued to be a problem. It takes approximately 20 to 24 hours for the systems to cool the reactor down to less than 212 degrees and achieve what's called cold shutdown.
At its core, a nuclear power plant is not unlike a pressure cooker on a stove. Water is heated to the boiling point, creating steam. And steam under pressure turns turbines, generating electricity. The complexity and cost of nuclear energy is about keeping the radioactive genie in the bottle. So the uranium fuel sits inside rods, underwater, in a steel pressure vessel, surrounded by a concrete and steel containment structure inside a reactor building. All those layers of protection are there in case the water stops flowing. If that happens, it quickly boils away, exposing the fuel, and it melts, turning into radioactive magma. Unchecked, it will melt right through the steel reactor vessel and onto the concrete and steel containment structure that surrounds it. So at the Fukushima plants now, it is critical that the electric water pumps and valves keep running for the reactor core to safely cool down. Power normally comes from the electric grid, and the earthquake has caused a blackout. But there is a plan B. The plant is equipped with diesel-electric generators to provide power in an emergency. They start automatically, as they're designed to do.
If it had only been the earthquake, we wouldn't be here today. The safety systems were doing their thing, the reactor cores were being cooled, and things were going pretty well.
When the seafloor suddenly moves upward during the earthquake, it causes the water near the epicenter to rise with it. The giant swell is the start of a tsunami. Forecasters issue a tsunami warning. They predict 10-foot-high waves in Fukushima Prefecture. The main buildings at Daiichi and Daini are about 30 feet above sea level. So no one worries much about a tsunami. And then at 3:27 p.m., the first of 7 giant waves crashes over the seawall.
Then I saw the tsunami coming. I was on top of that hill, wondering if I was high enough. This thing was, it was huge.
The tallest surge of water is nearly 50 feet high, more than twice the height of the seawall.
津波は来ると思いましたけれども、そのはるかその16メートル、17メートルという。
Fukushima Daiichi is inundated. 2 workers drowned, trapped in the basement of the number 4 turbine building. Six generators, along with the wiring, switches, and breakers connecting them to the plant, are located in the basements of the turbine buildings for units 1 through 4. The floodwaters destroy them all. 2 additional generators behind Unit 4 are high and dry, but their switching gear is in the basement, ruined by the seawater. The generators would be useless. Meanwhile, 7 miles to the south, at the other Fukushima plant, Daini, or number 2, the crisis is equally dire. The big waves roll in, swamping key motors, wiring, pumps, and generators.
ところが実際には津波が来ましたって言われた直後にこの部屋が停電しました。そこで、これは大変なことだったんだなというふうに実感しました。
Naohiro Masuda is the plant superintendent on that fateful day. He began his career here at Daini, reporting for duty in 1982 while it was still being built. He knows it as well as anyone.
ここの建物は海抜12メートルにあります。でここで停電したということは海の方の建物というのはもう、ほとんどのが津波の被害を受けてるなというのを想像しました。でそこからこれは大変になるぞというので、
Operators in the control rooms give Masuda very bad news. Units 1, 2, and 4 no longer have any operative cooling systems.
原子力というのは止める、冷やす、閉じ込めるということで、その3つが非常に大きな大事な機能なわけですけど、その冷やすという機能が、なくなってしまったということで、非常に大変なことが起こったというのをその時に初めて認識をしました。
But what needs to be fixed? And how? He orders a team of about 40 workers to go out and inspect the damage.
余震がずっとその日って何百回も余震が続いてるんですけども、その中で現場に行ってもらう必要があったんですよね。だけどその現場に行けっていう指示をするのは本当にためらいました。
They arrive in the rooms housing electric motors that run the pumps that draw seawater to cool the reactors.
扉のところに車のようなものが来ていたり、ものすごい瓦礫の山っていうんでしょうかね。なんでそんなところに我々を行かせたんだというふうに。
Today they have preserved some of the evidence of the flood that wiped out the motors and their wiring.
ここの部屋に電気の、サプライするシステムが置いてあります。で、この部屋もあそこまで津波が入ってました。
Back at Daiichi, reactors 1 through 4 are now in total darkness and things are quickly spiraling out of control.
事故対応をしている最中に一斉にランプが消えてる、警報音も消えてる、地震によってつまりステーションブラックアウト。
Station blackout, the two most dreaded words in the world of nuclear power generation. At Fukushima Daiichi, reactors 1 and 2 not only lose the alternating current that powers the pumps and valves, but also the direct current, there to keep the instruments working.
どんどん暗くなっていって非常に怖いというかですね、恐ろしい状況に陥っていった。ただでもう運転員の人たちも何が起こってるんだと、原子炉に水が入ってるか入ってないかすらわからない。
スタートラインに走るためにスタートラインに立ったと。だけど100メートル走れば終わるのか、はたまたマラソンを走らなきゃいけないのか。
The oldest reactor at the site is Unit 1. It began operation in 1971 and is equipped with outmoded last resort cooling systems called isolation condensers.
The steam being produced by the hot reactor core was routed into this large tank of water. The water would cool the steam, convert it back into water, and it would drain back into the reactor core to be recycled over and over again.
It is a passive system designed to work on natural circulation without any electrical power at all. So is it working? In the darkened control room, they don't have a clue. What they did not know at the time is when the power fails, the isolation condenser valves are almost completely closed, curtailing the flow of steam and water.
When the isolation condensers failed on Unit 1, the reactor water level just started boiling away because it was no longer being cooled and maintained by the isolation condensers.
If the isolation condensers are working properly, vents on the side of the reactor building would be releasing huge amounts of steam.
There was steam coming out of the discharge of it, but they didn't realize it wasn't sufficient. So they thought they had more time than they did.
Now there is nothing to stop the meltdown. At 3:42 p.m., 15 minutes after the tsunami waves rolled in, TEPCO notifies the national and local governments that there is a special event at the plant. Actually, it is an emergency that has never been envisioned.
マニュアルが想定していない状態でしたから、論理的に、次はこういう状態になるからこの操作をするっていうことが成り立たない。
日常的に訓練しているその想定を超えた事象になりましたけれども、現場からの少ない情報でもって即何ができるか、何をしたらいいかっていうふうに、とにかく時間を争うような形で。
They desperately need power, but from where? TEPCO dispatches generator trucks, but they are slowed by earthquake and tsunami wreckage. When they finally arrive, late on the 11th, damage to the plant's electrical system makes it all but impossible to connect them. So they must improvise, hoping to jury-rig their dead instruments back to life by raiding the parking lots, grabbing as many batteries as they can from buses and cars.
どうやって生かすんだってことに、やはり数時間どこにつなぐんだ、全てシーケンスといわれる展開接続図、彼らはひたすらチェックをして、それで数時間かかってると、ある意味いたずらに時が過ぎるというか。
Meanwhile, the water is boiling away fast in Unit 1. But how fast? 6 hours after the tsunami at 9:19 p.m., they finally get the batteries and some portable generators rigged so the instruments can flicker on. The gauges show the water level in Reactor 1, normally 20 feet above the top of the uranium fuel, is now only 8 inches above it. They pencil in a running record of the water levels right beside the gauge. But the pressure in the vessel is so high it causes inaccurate instrument readings. They learn later the uranium fuel had actually been exposed for 3 hours.
It's becoming more like a lava flow from a volcano. So it overheated, melted, released the radioactive contents, and started falling into the bottom of the reactor vessel.
In Tokyo, Japan's Prime Minister, Naoto Kan, worries that he might have to order a mass evacuation from Fukushima all the way to Tokyo. 50 million people.
でもし東京までが避難しなければならなくなった時には、この日本という国は長期間にわたって国家としてのその機能が失われて大混乱を起こすだろうと。
At 9:23 p.m., he orders everyone living within 2 miles of Daiichi to evacuate immediately so TEPCO can prepare to vent some steam. Radioactive steam. At this stage, radioactive iodine-131 is the isotope of greatest concern. It is linked to thyroid cancer. Children are most vulnerable.
弁当しなければいけないというもちろん意識はあるんですけど、じゃあどうやってやるんだと。もう電源もない、それから空気作動弁っていうのがあって、これを開けなきゃいけないんだけれど、で圧縮空気があるんだけど、それすらないと。
Khan becomes increasingly frustrated and impatient.
了解したにもかかわらず、何時間経っても弁当が行われたという報告がない、つまりお金なかったんで、TEPCOから官邸に説明するために来ていた原子力の専門家が私に答えたのは、理由は分かりませんという。
Much of the information he was getting from his government and the utility turned out not to be true, and he had no source of independent knowledge of what was going on in those reactors.
Khan decides the only way to know for sure is to go there. And so early on the morning of March 12th, he flies to Fukushima Daiichi. He passes over mile upon mile of utter devastation from the earthquake and tsunami. Nearly 16,000 are dead. He lands at Daiichi just after 7, about 15 hours after the tsunami.
でそこで吉田所長と45分間話をして、で現場の状況を聞くと同時に、その吉田所長が信頼できる人間だということを判断することができました。
The Prime Minister endorses the superintendent and his plan. Yoshida vows to begin venting at 9 a.m. But there is much to do and much to consider.
その真っ暗の中の原子炉建屋に、しかももう格納容器の圧がすごく高いっていう状態で突っ込んでいくんで、ある意味、決死体ってことはいいのか分かんないですけど。
To open the vent, they need to manually turn 2 valves, one in the basement and another on the second floor. At 9:04 a.m., a pair of workers makes their way through a dark labyrinth to the second floor of the Reactor 1 building. It takes them 11 minutes to open the valve. 9 minutes later, a second team heads for the valve in the basement.
They get to a point about midway and their radiation is higher than they thought they'd get. They basically had drawn if radiation gets to this point, we'll go back. Well, they got to that point before they got to the valves.
They abort their mission. In the Emergency Response Center, they realize they must find a way to open the vent remotely. They scramble to find an air compressor that can be attached to the pipe that blasts the valve open. Finally, at 2:50 p.m., steam starts rising from the exhaust tower, and the pressure starts dropping. Could the worst be over? Actually, it is just about to begin. At Daini, where the power is still out and the reactors are getting hotter, there is a stroke of luck. There is power inside the radiation waste building behind Reactor 1. But they need it down by the water. Naohiro Masuda decides to lay cables, hoping to restore cooling to the reactors. Each of the 4 reactors needs 3 operative pump motors. They need to lay 5.5 miles of cable to connect them all. He needs supplies urgently, at least 50 big spools of heavy-duty cable. Masuda orders the cable, but the shipment is delayed.
警察がどんどん避難誘導をしているので、その誘導にあって全く違う方向に行ってしまったという。
While they wait at Daini, the crisis is getting much worse at Daiichi. Uranium fuel rods are encased in zirconium.
If it gets too warm, there's a chemical reaction between the zirconium and the water or steam to produce large amounts of hydrogen.
The containment structure on a boiling water reactor is sealed with a dome-shaped top that is removed for refueling. The pressure in Reactor 1 is now so high that it slightly lifts the top. The hydrogen escapes through the gap and into the reactor building where it mixes with air. It would be just a matter of time before the highly flammable gas would explode. It is 3:36 p.m.
突然こう突き上げるような建物全体を突き上げるような衝撃とともに真っ暗になったんです。
また余震かと思ったけども、みんなあれ何かおかしいぞと。
ですから本部から原子炉建屋の一番上が、壊れてないっていうふうに、聞いて、私は愕然としました。
It is a devastating setback.
やっぱり当時働いてたほとんどの人たちは、生きて出れる感じはちょっとしてなかったかな。
At Daini, workers are preparing to lay the heavy cables when they get word of the explosion at Daiichi.
福島第一が爆発した時には、私でさえ全員を現場から緊急対策室に戻ってもらいました。 全部で500人も600人もいたわけですけど、その人たちに言ったのは絶対にみんなの身に危険が及ぶようなことはしないので安心してくれと。その代わり福島第二も大変なのでしっかりとこれからも仕事してもらう必要があるんだよっていうところを。
The cables arrive on the morning of the 13th. Finally, the heavy lifting to save Fukushima Daini begins.
ケーブルの重さというのが、モーターの容量が結構大きいので、モーターに数百アンペア流れるので結構太いケーブルを引かないといけないということです。だいたい分担すると1人当たり10キロから15キロを持って。
It is a race against time and physics.
普通そのぐらいのケーブルを引こうと思うと普通の工事のやり方ですと1ヶ月ぐらいかかる。あんな時間で引くことは多分無理だろうな、何日もかかるだろうなとは確かに思いましたね。
延べ200名くらい途中でもうグルーキーダウンしちゃったので総入れ替えで。
In the midst of this, Masuda is running out of fresh water to cool his crippled reactors. He asked TEPCO headquarters for a shipment.
で東京の方にですね水を持ってきてくれって頼んでも4000トンの水は彼らにとってはイメージできなくて4000リットルの飲料水に変わってしまったんですね。そういうのもあってもう東京も頼りにならない、自分たちで何とかするぞっていうのを宣言して水を探しました。
He remembers a creek used as a water supply during construction of the plant. Workers repair the leaky old pipe with a scavenged bicycle tube. At Daiichi, events are still overtaking them. As the dust settles at Unit 1, they learn 5 workers are injured. With freshwater reservoirs exhausted, they scramble to inject seawater into the reactors. By 7:04 p.m., success. But using corrosive seawater means the reactors will surely be destroyed. TEPCO headquarters tells Superintendent Yoshida to stop while they seek government approval.
Yoshida does this very dramatic thing where on the video conference, he orders the people to stop the seawater injection. Before that, he called them over and said, I'm going to order you to stop the seawater injection. Ignore that. That's just for Tokyo. You continue seawater injections.
この吉田所長の判断は私は正しかったと思ってます。
ここで海水チューンを止めていたらもっとひどいことになってたと思いますよ。
その間に今度は3号がおかしくなってくるし、で次の我々のやっぱり使命はとにかく3号を1号にしないと。
With no battery power, they are unable to open the valves to begin venting Unit 3, and there are no handles on these valves. So they grab car batteries, hoping to open them from the control room. By 9 a.m. Sunday, March 13th, the Unit 3 reactor core is exposed and melting. Pressure keeps rising. Fearing another hydrogen explosion, Yoshida orders workers to retreat to the Emergency Response Center early on the morning of March 14th. But the pressure plateaus, and he lifts the order an hour later.
ものすごくその水素爆発に注意をしながら作業員を出したり引っ込めたり、結局50人近い人を3号の原子炉建屋の周りに出してる時に3号の爆発が起こってしまって。
It is 11:01, March 14th.
ものすごいその人数を外に出していたので、そこで安否確認で本当にその時はもう心配というか、本当に人は死んでしまったかもしれないと思ってる中で、1人2人3人4人戻ってきて、でみんな真っ青な顔をして血を流してっていう中で。
When Unit 3 explodes, 11 workers are injured. Amazingly, no one is killed.
やっと全員なんとか安否が分かったという状態で、今度2号が水位が下がり始めたっていう状態なので。
It seems inevitable that Unit 2 will be the next to blow. At noon on March 14th, an hour after the explosion at Unit 3, the water covering the hot radioactive fuel begins to drop precipitously. An hour and a half later, the emergency backup cooling system fails. Superintendent Yoshida quietly tells a few trusted workers to prepare buses for an evacuation. For now, he has no choice but to order his men back into harm's way.
After the explosion of Unit 3, he begged us to again go to the field to save Unit 2. It was very impressive.
But by 6:22 p.m., the water is gone. The uranium fuel is completely uncovered and melting. Again, they try to use car batteries to open the vents and relieve some pressure. No luck.
14日から15日の真夜中っていうか明け方までは本当になんていうか地獄のような世界でしたね。
As day breaks on the morning of March 15th, they hear a loud explosion. But it is not what they dreaded. It is a complete surprise. There has been an explosion in Unit 4. But this reactor was shut down for maintenance when the tsunami hit. What could have happened there? And what saved Unit 2 from blowing up? The investigation will have to wait. Superintendent Yoshida orders an immediate evacuation of 650 workers. He and nearly 70 supervisors would stay. In the confusion, they become known as the Fukushima 50.
暴れる原子炉と戦ってるし、目に見えないですから確かに目に見えない時なんですけど、やはりで言えば、戦争で戦ってるのと確かに同じ。
It is midnight on the 13th. In the dining control room, operators are girding for what seems inevitable, venting radioactive steam into the environment. Then the cables and the motors finally start falling into place, and the mood shifts dramatically.
ケーブルが引き終わりましたっていうと拍手が起こりますし、モーターを回します。モーターはまずテストで回すんですね。でモーターがうまく回りましたっていうと拍手が起こって、回るとみんなが本当に歓声が上がるっていうのをもう1号機2号機4号機と3回本当にやったねっていう感じのいいこうなんですか拍手と歓声が湧いた時間だったと思います。
感動ですよ。これですよね。本当によくやってくれたと。もうなんてすごいことをやる仲間なんだろうなと。本当にやったやった。
1号機は不格納容器の設計圧力ギリギリのところまで圧力が上がってましたので、2時間前だったということで、ギリギリだったのかなと思ってます。
At Daiichi, Superintendent Yoshida has now lifted the evacuation order, and workers that had fled start to return.
そこで少しずっとボトムまで落ちてきたところを少しだけ上やから、あとは燃料プールの燃料をいかに冷やすか。
The pools are high up in the reactor buildings, there to store both spent and new uranium fuel. There are more than 3,100 fuel bundles, millions of uranium pellets in the pools for units 1 through 4. They are not inside the containment vessels, and there are no emergency pumps to keep them full. Should the pools go dry, the rods could overheat and catch fire in the open air, releasing a huge amount of radiation. This is the worst-case scenario that has haunted Prime Minister Khan. It could force him to order a mandatory evacuation of everyone for 150 miles or more. Tokyo, uninhabitable. Maybe for decades. It is hard to fathom. Nuclear plant operator Chuck Casto, then an NRC executive, arrives at Fukushima Daiichi in the midst of this turmoil and uncertainty.
The biggest challenge right away, as soon as I stepped foot on the ground, was should people take lethal doses to stop this accident? The situation was desperate. Concerns we had never faced before.
You can see the steam coming up in Unit 3. That's the worst explosion that they had.
And we were trying to work our way through them the best we could.
It is time for desperate measures. On the morning of March 17th, Self-Defense Forces helicopters fly 4 daring missions, hoping to dump seawater onto the Unit 3 spent fuel pool, which appears to be boiling away. Radiation forces them to fly high above the plant, too high.
いう中で正直言うとほとんど水入らなかった。なのでそこはまだ全然その緊迫した状態からは取れてなくて。
So they turn to an elite rescue squad from the Tokyo Fire Department. They plan to use equipment designed to fight high-rise fires. They arrive at the plant late the next night. They are led by Deputy Chief Yukio Takeyama, a 35-year veteran.
とにかく3号機水を入れてくれてるよね。やはりピンポイントでただカジケツみたいな適当に水まいてなくて、そこの使用済み燃料プールに入れなければいけない。現在の測定値、どっかの前で400マイクロン。中で真っ暗い中での活動だったので、早く終わってくれ、これしか思わなかったですね。あとはそこが爆発したらどうしようかって、この2つを考えましたよね。真ん中より左側にマンホールそっかり穴あります。加速器あります。マンホールこっち左側？はい、真ん中より左側。真ん中より左側。そういう恐怖が今までなかったなっていうような気がしますけど、が一番なんかこう、ああ本当にやばいと思うのはこういうことなんだみたいな感じです。
They get the job done in 20 minutes. Day breaks. The water is now flowing. The fuel in storage is never exposed to the air, and the feared radiation is not released. Tokyo is saved.
少しずつ本当に少しずつですけど、まあ希望が出てきたというか、落ち続けたところが最悪一番そこでなんていうんでしょうかね、引っかかって止まってるっていうか、もうそれ以上は落ちないというところにただ行ったというだけで。
For the first time in days, Takeyuki Inagaki finds the time and a working phone to call home.
時に家内が生きてんのっていうか、大丈夫なの、声が完全に裏返ってたんでかなり動揺はしていたと思いますけど、とりあえずは生きてるわと手足もあるわという話をして、ただ
In the days and weeks ahead, the nightmare does not end, but at least it gets no worse. Concrete pump trucks unleash steady torrents of seawater onto the fuel pools. Power is fully restored to the plant, finally, on March 21st. By June, they install a complex filtration system to remove cesium from the water washing through the radioactive debris and flowing into the Pacific. And slowly, the answers start trickling in. Why did Unit 4 explode? It used the same vent stack as Unit 3. When hydrogen built up there, it seeped into Unit 4 via a shared duct. Why didn't Unit 2 blow up as they feared? They realized the explosion at Unit 1 knocked out a door near the top of the Unit 2 reactor building. It allowed hydrogen and radiation to escape Unit 2. While it was venting, the wind shifted toward land, sending the highest concentrations of cesium to the northwest. The fallout will linger for decades. 8 months after the earthquake and tsunami, reporters tour Fukushima Daiichi. Superintendent Masao Yoshida tries to downplay the worry.
周辺の住民の方にご安心いただける程度のプラントは安定していると。だけど作業するのはまだまだ厳しい状況があると。
Yoshida had been reprimanded by his TEPCO superiors for disobeying orders and injecting seawater during the worst of the crisis. What about his workers? 6 that ventured into the reactor buildings trying to open the vent valves got the worst doses, as much as 678 millisieverts of radiation. 5,000 millisieverts is considered lethal, and 250 is the maximum normally allowed for nuclear plant workers in an emergency. The cancer risk for those 6 Daiichi workers is undoubtedly greater in the long run. But during that fateful week, they all believed there was no long run for them.
極端なこと言うともう死ぬだろうと思ったことが数度ありましたと。いつその先が見えない。最悪するともう本当にメルトがもうどんどん進んでいってですね、コントロール不能になるという状態を感じましたので、そういう時にこれで終わりかなという感じをしたと思います。
1 month later, the hot, melted cores finally drop below the boiling point of water. Cold shutdown. By then, Yoshida is gone. He has cancer unrelated to his job. He dies in July of 2013.
Yeah, he was always keeping his head. So always encouraging people.
良きリーダーというか、超人的でしたよね。判断にしろ、判断の内容というか判断の速さも含めてですね。
Without him, I could not have, I could not be here.
Fukushima, 4 years later. What was once one of the largest nuclear power plants in the world is now the center of the most complex, expensive, expansive cleanup ever attempted. It could take as long as 40 years. It will rely on technology not yet invented and the determination of people not yet born. The man in charge of it all is the hero of Fukushima Daini, Naohiro Masuda, is now TEPCO's chief decommissioning officer. It is a very different challenge than what he faced in March 2011.
ところが今のディコミッショニングの仕事っていうのは世界中で誰も経験したことがない仕事です。ですからここに向かって頑張るぞという時にインストラクションがきちんとは出せない。もっとその謙虚な気持ちでみんなでよく考えながら何をやっていくのかっていうのを決める必要があって。
This is not Chernobyl, hastily abandoned, encased in a tomb, and encircled by a fence. This is Japan, where land is precious, and they have a history of rising from ruin. Here they hope to erase the painful past and maybe one day return to their homes.
生まれて育って今こういう状況になって住めない環境にありますけども、そこを何とかしたいというその思いは皆さん全員が持ってここで働いてくれていると私は思っています。
It is a disaster with deep roots at high levels. Bad design decisions, technological hubris, a broken safety culture. But in Japan, the sins of the company are the sins of its workers, so they are considered culprits as well as victims.
やるべきことをやったしか思ってないですね。こういう事態になって申し訳ないというような気持ちが多いです。
Mankind has never faced the forces of physics and the forces of nature that those people faced. The system may have failed, but those operators did the best they could with what they had. In my mind, they were absolute heroes.
プラウドというか、その地震への何か誇れるというものはないけれど、やっぱりほとんどの発電所の職員があそこで生まれて育ってるんで、やっぱり地元を守ると、家族を守る。実際に今でも何万人の人がやっぱり避難してて、で、そのやっぱり原因を作ったのは我々なので、決してヒーローではない。
So much to open your eyes, 'cause I need you to look into mine. Tell me that you'll open your eyes.
P4 Morgen.
Det gode ved P4 om morgenen er, at der er nogen, der har sammensat et bredt program i forhold til trafik og nyheder og musik.
God radio for mig, det er, at jeg er dækket ind 360 grader. Det giver mig en følelse af, at jeg lytter til noget, som gør mig glad.
Vi bruger mange timer i lastbilen, og så giver det en god følelse at høre god afvekslende radio. Det bliver nemt at komme igennem dagen, og jeg føler, at de gør det rigtig godt lige nu.
Det bliver en god morgen på P4. Alle hverdage fra klokken 6.
Jeg laver sgu ikke noget om, så laver den bare selv.
Glæd dig til historien om Dansktoppen.
Det var hans pligt at skåne den danske befolkning for sådan noget lort.
Jørgen Hjorting kasserede en plade, jeg havde lavet.
Hele historien.
Det var noget kommercielt bras.
Vi jokede meget med dengang, at man kunne købe en kasse CD med Candice, og så kunne man få 10 ruller toiletpapir i rabat.
Er det kvalitet?
Det er jo et pinligt spørgsmål.
Altså, når vi hører det i dag, så må vi bare indrømme.
Ja, okay, det er da ikke falsk. Døm selv.
Jeg troede, det var et spørgsmål om et år af højst 2. Så var den væk igen.
Dansktoppen. Elsket og hadet. Onsdag 20:30. Kun på K.
Det er dansk, det er godt. Og det synes jeg nok, vi har lov at være lidt stolte over.
kæft, hvor er der vildt herinde.
Overalt i verden tænker arkitekter i nye baner.
Ej, et fantastisk rum.
De ser det smukke i gamle bygninger.
I virkeligheden er det jo bare en stor skal, men der er også en særlig ånd i rummet.
De forbedrer og forvandler de udtjente og forladte bygninger.
Så skal man så ligesom skrue det fast, mens vandet det pibler op.
Det er kun tosser, der vil prøve på det.
Ja. Ane Kortsen tager ud i verden og møder folkene bag de succesfulde forandringer.
So suddenly you had this idea.
Yes, one story between it.
And they said, you're crazy.
Yes.
Fantastiske forvandlinger. I aften 20:30 kun på K.